Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Phil Elverum Discography Breakdown Series. Today, with me, of course, we have.
Hey, I'm Alex. Here we are on episode 4. It's
Yes.
mid-January now. Hot
Yes.
guy winter is in full swing. We're wearing our freshest outfits, listening to our weirdest Phil albums. Just guys being dudes. What a time to be alive, folks.
That's beautifully put. Yeah, it is currently blizzarding out my window as we speak, which I think is fitting.
That's pretty mighty.
Yeah, it is very mighty. Well, today we're talking about Mount Eerie, the fourth and final full-length LP put out by Phil Elverum under the moniker The Microphones, which is complicated because the album's called Mount Eerie, and then he would go on to record music under the name Mount Eerie, from here on out, basically. So it's kind of like...
I feel like you just have to specify by calling it the Mount Eerie album.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, because we're talking about Mount Eerie, the album, not Mount Eerie, all the other stuff.
That being said, this won't be our last episode talking about the microphones.
It won't.
We have, I think, 2 more. But that's beside the point.
Yeah, those are sort of like some more EPs, kind of some like I don't know, like just kind of getting as much as we can from the microphones.
We'll go over a few tracks from like the loose like mini albums, EPs, compilations that he put out that are all kind of remnants of previous albums.
But while we're here, I mean, like, do you want to talk at all about like the name change? I feel like that is something that we should probably bring up at some point. Like,
yeah, I mean, I don't know. Phil has said that the name change is meaningless, but there is like a distinct kind of there's a tangible difference between Mount Eerie music and Microphones music.
Totally.
And this very much feels like the tipping point.
Exactly.
Like this album doesn't sound like Microphones music or Mount Eerie music, but
yeah,
but
that's
in a way it's a transition from the Microphones ideas to the Mount Eerie ideas.
That is fair, because like you said, Phil does often say that the name change is meaningless, which it is in the sense that it's just Phil Elverum and then and it's Phil Elverum now. But like you can hear a difference. I feel like the name, the Microphones, is definitely more like emblematic of the stuff he was doing earlier, like the recording production experiments, like Microphones or whatever. And like as he moves forward, that kind of gets abandoned in favor of this kind of like introspective songwriting, heavy folk music. So I think Mount Eerie is sort of more fitting in that way.
Yeah, but absolutely. It gets, and this is not to say he doesn't experiment under the Mount Eerie moniker, and there isn't like any kind of like elemental sound collage or anything, but it's kind of, it's more integrated, it's a little bit more elegant. It's not to say that it was bad before it was elegant, just it's different, you know?
Yeah. And I think you're right. This album, Mount Eerie, is kind of the one that is the first one to sort of cross that threshold, you know, where it's like, this is a good kind of
This thing is really well put together, really masterfully put together, and it's a fucking monster.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
What's that noise?
Yeah, I'm getting a foghorn.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what is that? It sounds like a foghorn.
So for those not in the know, at the moment I live on an island, and they are fucking blasting the foghorn over and over and over again right now.
That's actually really fitting, and I'm not gonna edit this out. Not at all.
Don't.
That's
so
great.
that takes us to the opener of the album, which opens with the foghorn from. There it is again, which opens with the foghorn from the Glow Part 2.
Yes, what a great transition this ended up being, completely on accident. But yes, as Alex said, the first song on this album, Mount Eerie, is called The Sun, and the first, I don't know, like 6 or 7 minutes or so of the song is that sort of ambient noise that kind of makes up the last several minutes of My Warm Blood, the last track on the Glow Part 2. So again, we mentioned this last time, but the songs kind of flow into each other really well. Like the sound is the exact same between the two songs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've, this will be kind of a little bit of a different episode for me because I really had not spent too much time with this album beforehand. So I put in a handful of listens to get ready for this podcast, taking notes and stuff, and I still have trouble figuring out which parts are from which songs. and I couldn't list the songs for sure. I was just listening, and it's all just one big item, big thing.
That is true, and even me, who I've listened to this album for the first time probably like 7 years ago at this point, it's still very hard to talk about. It's one of his most abstract albums.
Absolutely.
It's
downright cryptic.
It's very cryptic,
a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's like kind of overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah.
But
it deals in really big abstract concepts too, life and death and the universe.
Right, yeah, and apparently this album sort of it follows a kind of narrative, like a literal narrative, where Phil is the protagonist, and the whole album is like this metaphorical journey that he goes on, which is all very like nebulous and kind of hard to pin down exactly. But
yeah, I do have a CD copy with this big poster that describes the narrative, and it's beautiful, by the way. It's like this enormous, like, gorgeous illustration of the mountain, and you read it from bottom to top as he like climbs the mountain to evade death, I guess, is the narrative.
I think that's a pretty good way to put it. Like, yeah, the narrative, I guess, at least for the first track here, The Sun, then it's hard. We're probably going to be talking about this album in somewhat sequential order just because it does sort of flow into itself really well, and it does sort of follow a like sequence of events that kind of happen in like a sort of chronological order. But yeah, I guess the first song here, The Sun, we already mentioned, it starts with that like kind of, I don't know, I keep calling it ambient noise. I feel like that's not what it is. It's like a sound. Yeah. It's kind of like a field recording or something.
So it, I mean, it does open. There's white noise and there's the foghorn, and it, opens up to this like kind of heartbeat-esque drum rhythm that gradually grows more and more complex until it's this like chaotic, tribalistic big thing that feels like a thunderstorm.
Yeah, also we should mention that this song is 17 minutes long.
Yeah.
So it's like
that makes it the longest in his discography, right?
It does. It does. I think there is some weird complicated like how he divides Mount Eerie Part 6 and 7 that might, I don't know. But yeah, 17 minutes long. I think the first 9 or 10 minutes is this kind of like crescendo where it starts with like the foghorn and the like I Want Wind to Blow playing quietly in the background, and then the heartbeat kind of comes in, and then the drums just sort of crescendo for like 5 minutes until it's really loud.
So he put out this booklet called Headwaters of Mount Erie, along with a little mixtape CD he put together of his influences, where he kind of tries to explain the album, and in it he talks about this percussion section as being the process of the main character, which is in quotes Phil. Growing from like time in the womb to the age of 24, and so it starts out with like a simple heartbeat, and it gets a little bit more complex as he like grows into more of a thing, and then it gets really hectic and chaotic with real outside life. Which was kind of an interesting factoid. It can be hard to understand the different conceptual components of this album for sure. It's definitely dense.
Yeah. Speaking of that Headwaters booklet you just mentioned, a lot of the narrative that I've been able to derive from listening to this album comes kind of directly from that booklet. Because if you just listen to this album without knowing what's in the booklet, it's not necessarily something that's like easy to pick up on.
No.
So it's more sort of like supplementary reading, I guess. Like with the album, that's kind of how I used it in the last week or whatever that we've been listening to this.
Yeah, I tried to get into this record a few times, like back when I was getting into the Go Part 2, because I knew this was supposed to be an important one, and I hadn't really read I was aware of the booklet, but I hadn't read it, and I hadn't read any of the stuff from the actual like Mount Eerie CD booklet, and you know I didn't know anything about the narrative, and it's too immaterial without these supplements, I feel. I wasn't able to like really get in or connect to the really strange stylistic choices he makes all over this record without knowing any of the context, and that's part of why, you know, we got to this episode, and I hadn't really listened to the album that many times.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I feel like, you know, I feel like you should always listen to an album more than once, you know, to really get a full grasp on it. But this album, it's like almost demands that you listen to it several times before it even starts to like make kind of sense.
Yeah, even this past week, like, I didn't realize that I loved the album until like this morning.
Yeah, which is like perfect timing, honestly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess just to talk a little more about like the song itself, The Sun. I guess the narrative here on the first track is like Phil he gets like left abandoned on this beach with nowhere to go.
Call back to It Was Hot, maybe.
Yeah, perhaps.
Just based off of the elemental themes of the 4 records.
Right. And then I guess death in quotes, I'll put it, because I'm pretty sure he puts that in quotes in like the little booklet as well. Like arrives on a ship, and then Phil like flees for solace on Mount Erie, which kind of sparks the whole like conceptual arch that seems to run through the rest of this album. But there's some really cool and interesting things that happen like sonically on this song as well.
I missed the death arriving on the ship part, and when I was reading the Headwaters booklet, it referred to that moment in the song as dawn, which was really interesting to me, because like on the Glow Part 2, dawn was something he was kind of like mourning his inability to reach, and then on the album Dawn, the Mount Eerie album, which would come out later on, it's something he's kind of fighting to get to, and I always interpreted it as some kind of like relief, like being able to move on, but here it's something that's foreboding, that he's like distinctly afraid of, and kind of spends the album fleeing.
Yeah, he says that kind of literally, like scary trumpets, or like he's running in terror for the mountain or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a lot of very vivid imagery kind of on this song. Just like kind of Phil, I guess, running away. And some really cool things that I just want to mention. The line, hear their scary trumpets, and then like a really loud burst of trumpets comes in. I've always thought that was really cool, because trumpets are nowhere else on the track before then.
It's definitely a really cool moment, and the way he kind of sings along, like mimicking the sound of the trumpets, is like weird and off-putting, and also just like deeply haunting, and I'm kind of obsessed with it.
Also, a part I've always loved is like what I'm trying to find what the exact, like, here comes a black ship rising under red sail, and then there's that really loud, like, I don't know what it is, like a synth or a bass or something that's, I think, supposed to sort of be like a horn or something.
Yeah. Okay, actually, the black ship is what I was referring to as dawn. I kind of assumed that's what you meant when you said death, but maybe I just got a little
black
scrambled.
ship.
Yeah.
Either way, yeah, this song, it's really kind of hard to like describe just because it's so unlike really any other song in the Microphones discography.
Or Mount Eerie discography.
Or kind of like anybody's
discography. He did it
discography.
this one time and he would never do it again, and yeah, it's you can't hear this anywhere else.
Yeah, there's just a lot of just off the wall ideas right from the start that will continue into the album.
The whole thing has this weird tribalism to it.
Yeah.
It feels at the same time like ancient and incredibly new.
Right? Yeah. Just reading through that booklet, one thing I liked is that during the drum crescendo, Phil says that it gradually grows more complicated and worldly.
Yeah.
I don't like the way that was put.
Yeah.
And then yeah, the track ends with these like, well, it just gets really, really loud. Like the guitars become super distorted, the drums become really loud, and it kind of crescendos all the way up until it's basically just really loud white noise.
Yes.
That then transitions into the sound of rainfall,
which is
like really smoothly.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, amazing how he did that.
Yeah.
It's like so cool.
Yeah.
And I guess that's a good segue into Solar System. But there is another thing I want to mention about the Sunquake, is that according to Genius, this song is sampled in the track Hanging Out with My Mom in Women's Apparel off of 2 by Car Seat Headrest. So I listened to that song today on like Bandcamp, and I was not able to determine if that is true or not. But apparently Car Seat Headrest sampled this song.
Okay.
Which wouldn't surprise me, I guess. But
yeah. Okay, this is kind of an unrelated point, but one thing I kept thinking about this week, I just kept going back to, is, like, the Glow Part 2 had acclaim, it had some buzz, and I can't help but feel like if he had gone, like, a little bit broader, a little bit more accessible for the follow-up, Phil could have been, like, actually kind of famous, like indie famous. I mean, he is, but, much more so. But instead, he went and made his absolute weirdest, wonkiest, least accessible album.
I know. Which is, like, kind of on brand, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
It's so funny to me to think about how the Glow Part 2 is Pitchfork's Album of the Year in 2001. I mean, I'm sure they were, like, a much less sort of, like, ubiquitous music
Pitchfork
magazine.
At the time was pretty new.
Right.
Like, only like 5 years, I think, maybe?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
But it's just so random. I don't know. Is there anything else about the sun that you had to say? That you, like, kind of hit on?
It's not really. It's just a big old wild ride. That's an incredibly inaccessible way to start an album.
Yeah, right.
You start out with like 5 minutes of like empty noise, and
I know.
And then you move into like 10 minutes of tribalistic drums, and then there's sort of a song there.
Yeah, and even the sort of song is like, I don't know. It's like a really it's like tenuously a song. Yeah. I don't know, like the guitar is like really sparse, like Phil is singing over like a choir of other voices at points.
It is not a way to hook new listeners.
It's not. But also that's not to like disparage the song in any way, of course.
Oh,
like
no,
it's
not
an incredible
at all.
song, but it's like yeah.
This is just what like kept me away all these years,
Right.
Like what kept me from diving in, because it is, you're like, you just want to put on a Phil Elverum record, and you put it on, and there's no music for a while, and then it gets real weird.
Yeah, right. Like you kind of have to sit down and like pay attention. Like
you have to be prepared for the Mount Eerie-ness of this album.
Exactly.
You have to go into it understanding that like This album on its own is almost just like not even a Microphones or a Mount Eerie album, and you're getting into it for itself rather than because you want another Phil project to listen to.
That's a really good way to put it. Yeah, it kind of exists in its own space, I guess.
And to that point, also, this feels like much more of a band record than almost anything he's done. Like,
yes,
there are other people on, I think, every single track, and
yep.
like, there are so many voices that aren't his own. Like, I don't know, the amount of time he spends singing on this record, I feel like is matched by other vocalists.
For sure. And
yeah.
And another thing that's cool, because I did want to bring that up at some point. Well, for one, it's interesting because, we learned that the Glow Part 2 is actually not a very, collaborative effort in that it's very much a Phil-only centric Microphones album. But this one is kind of the exact opposite side of the spectrum, where it's, all of his, revolving door cast of kind of musicians that he's brung in and out until this point are all here, and they're kind of the most involved that they have been up until this point.
Yeah, and there's a part on Mount Eerie, the title track number 4, where there's this part for Big Black Death in quotes.
Yep.
And it's sung by Carl Blau and someone else. I'm blanking on his name, and it's they wrote that part also. They wrote the words, and it's interesting because it's such an integral part of the record.
Yeah, I think that's Kelvin Johnson is the other.
Okay.
But yeah, these other people, they kind of almost play characters on the album. Where it was Phil is sort of portraying himself. He's the quote unquote protagonist of this narrative, and then there's all these other people who are sort of his friends in real life come in and play other characters that sort of come in and out of the narrative as well.
Protagonist is such an interesting term for his character on this record because he's not charismatic. He doesn't portray himself positively by any means. He's kind of like a mouse.
Right. Yeah. I guess main character would probably be more apt.
No, I'm not saying protagonist was the wrong word or anything. It's just it's an interesting protagonist.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I guess just kind of circle back a little bit. So the sun ends with this really chaotic sort of white noise that transitions into rainfall really beautifully.
Yeah.
Into the second song on the album here, Solar System, which is, in contrast with the sun, is probably the most, I guess you could say, accessible song on the album, or at least the most
absolutely
sort of recognizably Microphones-y song here.
And this was the first moment on this record that I really felt like I connected to on an emotional level.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's definitely the most traditionally accessible on the record.
Right. It's sort of just a little acoustic track. It's kind of haunting. I guess at this point in the story, Phil is sort of walking around in the woods. I don't know. I guess he's sort of beckoning for some comfort or something. I don't know. How did you interpret this? What he's talking about?
I don't know. I'm not that far yet, I don't think.
That's fair.
But I can tell you that the way they sing "I Know You're Out There" together really fucking gets me for some reason.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite. That is Mira. I just have the little credits up.
Yeah.
Next to me. So yeah, that's Mira on this track specifically.
Shouts out to Mira.
Yep. Just another couple tidbits I kind of got from the Headwaters book that I thought was interesting. The line "blow over me, solar wind" is apparently a reference to "I Felt My Size" from the Glow Part 2.
Right, yeah. He talked about how a person can feel as big and isolated as a planet.
Yeah, right, exactly. Which is, I think that there is a similar line on I Float My Size, like I'm not a planet at all.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And then another interesting thing on there was the lanterns on lakes line is apparently a reference to this Japanese festival called Toro Nagashi, where they like release paper lanterns out over the water. And he's sort of comparing the night sky in this song to how that would look, which I think is really cool imagery. I looked up what that looked like, and I was like, oh, okay, I get it.
I'd love to go see that in person.
Right, yeah.
So that's awesome.
Yeah.
This record is filled with like lots of really interesting and weird imagery, and Phil obviously has a knack for imagery. That's an essential part of his discography, but it's like here it's just different. What he's doing with it is different, and like what it achieves is different, and kind of the things he focuses on are unlike anything else he's done before or after this record.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Even like, and I'm a fan of Mount Eerie Parts 6 and 7. I've listened to that handful of times, but I never knew like its connections to this album, and I guess I don't know. Even on that record, it's still just different how he's doing it. This record stands alone.
It is very, I'm sure I'll go on to say this like 5 more times in this episode, but it's just so like singular and so unique. There's like genuinely not another album that I can really think of to even compare this to. Maybe like, I don't know, like Comus, like just some weird like freak folk album from like the 70s. But yeah.
You know, maybe I'm going out on a limb here, but I feel like you could draw some comparisons to East.
Interesting. I'll have to sit on that one for a second.
They both create this kind of insular world.
Yeah.
And they both deal in really long songs, and they both have very short track lists.
They both have, I think, exactly 5 songs.
Yeah, and you know, on this album, Phil's singing is unlike anything I've heard before, again. The things he does with his voice are weird and unsettling and, like, inhuman, and...
Yeah.
I don't know how to put it. Distorted? Weird?
First of all,
just kind of...
Phil... Wait, sorry, you can finish.
No, you.
I was just gonna say, first of all, Phil and Joanna Newsom collab when?
That would be really something.
Yeah.
But, and anyway, to finish my point, Joanna also sings in a very unique way. Although on East, it's not like she had never sung like that before and never would again.
Yeah,
although
right.
East does mark a tipping point in her discography, because she did have to change how she sings for Have One on Me and you know, Divers, because she actually like lost her voice. It was bad for her. Anyway, this is not a Joanna Newsom podcast. I'm sure we'll do it in the future. I would push for that, obviously. I'm big Joanna fan. But
we'd have listen, Divers, #1 album of the decade.
Yes.
Like, we would have full Indie Heads podcast support for this venture. Okay, alright, so Solar System, good shit, but at the same time also probably the most like sort of straightforward song on here, and every subsequent song just kind of increases in weirdness, I think. Like until the end. So we have
Universe is fucking insane.
It really, well, first of all, we should also mention that there's 2 songs on here called Universe. there's 3 Universe and 5 Universe. Like the 3rd and the 5th song are called Universe. This is the 3rd song, Universe. It's like 2 universes, Mount Erie and Mount Erie. It's like, what is going on? But yeah, the way this song starts is really hard to describe. It's like this like these crazy loud distorted like drums and this like loud like angular distortion, and it just sounds so menacing. But then like this sort of really gentle and beautiful guitar melody kind of starts to come in, and it just sounds so random,
so
but
dang
like
pretty.
but it's just like it fits together so perfectly.
Yeah, and it gets, I don't know, I feel like its prettiness gets taken away from it quickly by like the vocals and kind of other like ambiance ephemera in the song. Like
Yeah.
it becomes kind of eerie and haunting.
Yeah, that is a good way to put it. One of the standouts on this track to me has always been the close dark voice that says like, "Do you really think there's anybody out there?" I don't know. That's just like one of those kind of like highlight moments.
Yeah, no, it's definitely kind of an affecting point on the album, especially because of like how much time they spent on the "I know you're out there" line and how kind of intimate and tender it was, and then immediately just kind of calling into question that like sort of shred of stabilizing or kind of anchoring information.
Yeah.
In
I
the
guess.
booklet, in the Headwaters booklet, he said it was about losing faith in something.
Okay. I think I missed that specific line in there. But yeah, he's like climbing the mountain, Mount Erie. I guess if we're kind of talking about the narrative that's here, and then he's sort of one thing that I always thought was, or that I thought was really interesting reading this booklet is the "there's no end in sight" kind of line at the end.
I highlighted that too.
Because well, first of all, apparently that is a reference to the Glow Part 2, but then
Yes.
Phil goes on to say that that sentiment is kind of at the heart of every Mount Erie project, like that there's no end.
Song.
Every Microphones project, yeah. See, this I knew that was gonna get me at some point. Yeah, he says there's no end means that we can see forever in terms of distance and life.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just kind of like this psychedelic abstract imagery about like living and dying in the universe that's kind of hard to parse through.
He goes on to say in that song, the line, sorry, "How many times have I learned this before?"
Yeah.
which is a big fucking ouchie, and I feel.
Right.
I don't know. That's something that's like crossed my mind before. Just making art as an artist, like I'll realize like I came to this conclusion in an earlier poem, in an earlier piece, whatever. Like here I am learning this thing about myself again, and I don't know. There's something kind of defeating about it. Just the sense that you're like just treading water, I guess.
Yeah. There's like that exactly, and then coupled with this weird like universal existential interpretation of that, where like this whole thing is about him like dying technically or whatever. So he's like questioning if his life is cyclical, like how many times have I died up here before?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just again really really interesting imagery.
Yeah.
Another fun thing, real quick. What do I care that the Black Knight has seized me? Apparently, is a reference to the song "Scatterheart" by Bjork. So I don't know. Phil's a Bjork fan. He's sort of referenced her music a few times throughout his discography. So
yeah, Voice in Headphones, very
Yep.
very famously. I mean, not famously, but
yeah. I know what you mean.
You know.
Famous to Phil Elverum fans.
Yeah.
So yeah, what else? Anything else about the universe here? I guess I should say real quick that in the lyric book, for the line "What do you want?", which is also sung by Kelvin Johnson, apparently that is sung by the universe. So the song is like Phil talking to the universe.
And Let me also mention that this line and a lot of other lines from this album would be kind of reused on later in his discography on Dawn.
Yes.
And in a way, those songs often feel like expansions on this, like kind of some sort of behind the fog the fog machine.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier, just like when we were on the chat today, that you wanted to do the listen of Don't Wake Me Up, It Was Hot, The Glow Part 2, Mount Eerie, and Dawn together, which I think is a good idea, specifically because Dawn, I think the songs on Dawn were written directly after the songs from this album.
Yeah.
So that is a kind of through line.
He put this album out and then went to Norway, like, I think 2 months later, or no, I think like only the month afterwards.
Yeah. I think he went to specifically.
Actually, sorry, he finished recording this album and then went to Norway. This album was released while he was in that cabin.
Interesting. Okay, I never actually knew that, because there is a lot. I mean, in comparison with other Microphones material, there's a lot more like live footage from this album. Like a lot of early Microphones concerts that you find are him sort of playing through these songs in particular. So it's interesting that he kind of left the country after this, or like while this was being released.
Yeah, he didn't wait till the end of the kind of album cycle process, and also he. In Dawn he has to leave. So I've read his Dawn journals, the whole dang thing, and he has to leave Norway to go on a tour with this friend he has a fraught relationship for reasons explored in that book. we can talk about later. And for tour in Japan, where I guess he must have that must have been for promotion of this album.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess I never had.
It's kind of interesting how he just uprooted his life in the middle of all of this.
Yeah, well, we mentioned this concert on the Glow Part 2 episode, or maybe it was the episode before, where he does a little Q&A session sort of in the middle of the show he's doing, and someone asks him why he's moving to Norway, and he just flat out is like, I don't know, and just like felt like a thing that I should do. So yeah, I guess if I had to toss one other thing on the pile about this song, the first universe is that there's a line, I know I'll be in the air, so that marks, I think, like every Microphones album, I think, says something about being in the air at least once, so
yeah,
so there it is.
That'll
happen.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, the song after this is I guess you could call it the title track. It's called Mount Eerie, and this is.
Can I just say this very stupid, very small point, which is that aesthetically the Roman numeral 4 next to the phrase Mount Eerie is just really pleasing, and I don't know why.
I guess I've never really kind of thought of that, but I would not disagree.
I go on my phone on Apple Music, and Indie Heads podcast sponsored by Apple Music. Thank you, corporate gods.
Yep.
I go on my phone on Apple Music, and I look at the track list, and it's just number 4 Mount Eerie, and there's something about it. I don't know why. Oh jeez. Sorry. I just cracked my ankle in a really intense and alarming way. I didn't mean to. I was just kind of pulling my leg up, and it just all went, and now we're totally and completely derailed. Let's just talk about our bodies.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just sitting on the couch. I can crack a lot of bones. I can crack my ankle intentionally, actually.
Yeah, no, actually I do, but in a very different way. Never done it this way before.
Yeah, surprise ankle crack is not so fun.
I crack the like ball of my foot, not the heel, but right beneath the toes, and then also my toes and my fingers, and my elbows and sometimes my knees, and don't do this.
Yeah.
I don't know how all of these weird habits have imparted themselves upon me, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, they aren't inherently bad. They don't actually cause arthritis like the myth says, but it's I don't know.
I know what you mean. It is sort of. I mean, like I also, for some reason, I just can crack way more joints than like the average person. So it's always
I can't crack my knuckles, and it freaks me out when people do it.
Okay, see, I would really freak you out.
It always does. It always has. I guess I mean, like, I remember being in elementary school and seeing people do it and just getting like bad frisson.
You're gonna hate this, but I think I've counted before and I can get something like 15 individual cracks out of each hand.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's like not normal.
Alright, and this is all pertinent to the discussion of Mount Erie because on the title track, vultures eat his body.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly right. That is what we were intending this whole time. Alright, so yeah, I mean, what a good segue into Mount Erie, the song.
The voice of Big Black Death is one of the most striking things on this record, and it's also just awesome the way it's like produced and recorded and the way they sing. It nails the part, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
It's like in an album that already is so singular and so unique in and of itself, like this part is like the most unique part on the album. Like there's really nothing in the world that I've heard that sounds like this little King Dark Death interlude.
Yeah.
Like there's this weird like gasping and moaning background vocals that are like the beat to like the percussion is like people breathing in and out really fast.
Yeah.
And then yeah, the King Dark Death voice, which I think is Kyle Field. Is it Field or Fields? Who collaborates with Phil a lot as well, comes and like takes Phil's life or whatever. But yeah, the lyrics are like so creepy in like the death part, and there's just
I think it's also, I don't know, I'm all scrambled. I think I was mixing up parts of Universe 1 and Mount Erie. But oh well. I'm still a novice here.
Well yeah, so and there are a lot of kind of, it's weird, but there's a lot of characters sort of to keep track of on this album, because in Universe you have the Universe is like a character, and then Close Dark Voice is a character. These are like how they're labeled on the
right.
And then you have the Big Black Cloud Choir, and then you have I don't know, how do you say this word? Precipice Carolers.
Precipice.
And then Precipice, thank you. Precipice Carolers, and then you have King Dark Death.
Yeah.
Oh, and then one of my favorite things about this whole song is the very last verse is Wind and Vultures. And the way that it's set up is so cool, because you have somebody is doing the voice of the wind and somebody's doing the voice of the vultures. I think it's like Carl Blau and Kyle Fields, but they're singing at the same time. But one of them is singing as the wind and one of them is singing as the vultures. And basically the vultures are like eating Phil's dead body and they're like singing about it.
Great stuff, folks.
And then the wind is like watching the vultures eat Phil's dead body, singing about it like at the same time. And it's just like such a like viscerally like kind of disturbing image, and just like the way it sounds is so creepy, and like the way his voice is like just so unsettling.
Yeah, and also there's this weird thing where because the vultures are eating him, they're like absorbing his memories, and they like they sing about like childhood memories from when he was 3, like Twilight on the porch.
It's just so bizarre.
And you know, in a vacuum, these individual concepts, you're like, sure, yeah, that's like quintessential Phil. But then, like, all together, they make for this just, you know, monstrous thing.
the last line in the song is like, the memory you did wear and now your song is inside them, which is again just sort of like upsetting imagery.
Yeah, it's stomach churning.
It really is.
It makes me think of the Glow Part 2 title track. Just like, I don't know why. I think just the line where he sings about forgetting his songs, I don't know how those could be connected, but it just really makes me think about that for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of similar. Why does Phil have so many songs about like getting eaten alive? I don't know.
That's just that's his thing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it works as like I guess like kind of physically affecting, I don't know.
This whole album, kind of unrelated point, this whole album is really cinematic.
It is. That's a really... You know what's so funny is on my notes, I just wrote the word cinematic like by itself in a bullet point. I was like, at some point I want to call it cinematic, so I'm glad that you beat me to a punch, because yeah, it really is.
I have a couple notes like that, sorry, but you finish your point.
Well, this is... I sent you a message about this earlier, just this really kind of brief memory I have of... I used to run...
yeah, read it.
Yeah, well, I used to run cross country in high school and in college, but this is a memory from high school, and I was just running through the woods like right before a thunderstorm, so it was like really dark and windy, and it was like just kind of creepy looking outside, and I was in the woods, and I was listening to this album, and like never in my life have I felt so physically inside an album, because Mount Eerie, obviously, like, again, a lot of natural sort of like elements to it, like literal physical things in the world, plus there's sounds of rain and like thunder, and so yeah, it really truly felt like I was kind of inside the album and experiencing it as like from like a first person view, which is, I don't know, I guess sort of like a unique experience to these songs.
Yeah, no, and I can see how a particular time and mood could absolutely put you into this album.
Yeah. And then just to finish it off, I compared it to Phil's albums are like the paintings from Super Mario 64.
I remember that.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
We should do a Super Mario 64 series on the Indie Heads podcast. and each album is a different painting from the game. Okay. I guess this is sort of a well, one more thing I want to mention. There's a part at the very end, the part we were talking about, where like an accordion comes in and there's like these bells, and I just think it's real cool. I don't know.
Yeah.
I like the accordion.
A lot of real cool moments on this album.
Yeah.
I feel like I had a thing I wanted to say a second ago. And I am trying to figure that out.
Super Mario 64.
Oh no, this was a little bit further back when we were just talking about it being cinematic. This project in general, this album is kind of emblematic of one thing I really love about Phil's oeuvre. Discography, whatever, which is that he approaches his records like art projects. You know,
yeah.
I feel like there's so much artifice around an album, and that the album has become its like own separate category from art project. But like, with Phil, like, so many of these records revolve around this one big central kind of concept, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And like the Singer's record is another great example of this. He just really wanted to make an album with an enormous choir of like non-professional singers, and he did, and it's not the best. I don't love that record, but it's, it still feels worthwhile. I'm still just like, sure, whatever, because and it also, it just doesn't matter that it's not that great, because he
he really did it.
Yeah, he was messing around and he was just kind of exploring an idea, and you know, sometimes ideas just don't work out.
Yeah. Another quick thing, just kind of relating to this being like an art project, or like a lot of his sort of work, you could categorize that way. Mount Eerie sort of has like 3 different album covers that kind of, I've seen them all sort of occur in equal part. There's the one that's like the Spotify one, which is like an actual drawing of Mount Eerie.
Yeah.
And then there's the one that's another drawing of like an old woman's face. And then there's one that just says Mount Eerie, but the M and the E is cut off, so it just says Mount Eerie.
That's my CD copy.
I think
it's actually, it's not that that's the cover, it just has no cover. That is a fold of part of this enormous poster that takes you through the narrative.
Oh, I never knew that. Okay.
And actually has a different illustration of Mount Eerie.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I've always, because that's the first one that I ever saw.
Yeah.
I think that used to be the Spotify cover, actually.
I wonder why all the change. I mean, I understand not using the Mount Eerie.
Yeah.
But like, I guess between the old lady and the actual mountain.
Yeah, I wonder if one sort of predates the other one, and maybe one is like a re-release cover or something.
Yeah, well, the old lady one is from the Microphones reissue series.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't understand why he went for changing the cover. There must be a reason, and maybe he even talks about it in the release, but neither of us own it.
Right, yeah. He's did that a couple times. I mean, I think Dawn has 2 covers. They're the same. One just says Dawn, and one which is just like a picture of the lyrics. And then No Flashlight reissue also has a slightly different cover than the original No Flashlight. So
and then also there's the CD copy of Dawn that's also the big book of his journals, like that. That's Dawn, and like it's on this textured cover that's meant to feel like birchwood.
Really, that's cool. I never knew that either.
It's an awesome item. I really enjoyed like looking through it and reading it. It also includes these photos he took from that time.
Okay.
And a map of the area in Norway, and also many comics that he drew when he was in the cabin.
Sorry, continue.
And it's worthwhile. I have a terrible attention span, and at the time it was the first book I had read in 4 years. Which I've been working on since then. Last year I read 2 books, and this year I'm gonna read 3.
Hey.
Yeah.
That's good. That's better than probably the vast majority of people. So, also, I would love to read that Dawn book at some point. I don't know if it's still for sale on his website. I'll have to check.
It is not.
Okay, I didn't think so.
If you get the reissued vinyl, which I also have because I love Dawn so much. He has the whole thing printed in very small print on a big old poster, but I would really recommend finding a CD copy.
Yeah.
It's out of print, but you can, I think you can find it like places for like $30. It's just, kind of you gotta look for it.
Yeah. And then
sadly is not how much it used to cost, but anyway.
I was also going to say that we at some point should do an episode just about his comics, because Phil has lots of comics. Actually, he used to have a whole comic series. I can't remember what it's called, but they're like genuinely really, really funny.
Yeah, we'll fit that in. Do a little interlude ep. We've got these interlude episodes planned, and the only reason they're interludes instead of regular episodes is because we didn't plan for them in advance, and I have made several thumbnail images for the YouTube videos well in advance, and I didn't want to change them, so it was easier to just say Interlude 1 rather than
we should name them
all the images.
We should name them something. I don't know.
That's a good idea.
We can mess around with
it. Change the interlude image.
Yeah.
I've been having fun making the pictures for this series, and I've gotten well ahead of myself.
Yeah, they're good. I like the one for this one too, specifically. I like the Mount Eerie one.
Yeah.
So I'd put that up there. Okay, so I feel like we should talk about the last song.
Yeah. Finishing this episode eventually would be a wise choice.
Right. Yeah. So, this song's also called Universe. It's the other universe song here. 5 universe.
Let me reiterate that this one is also fucking nuts and incredible.
It's crazy. Basically, the whole song is like the instrumental of this song is just like a chorus of other vocals, and then some very like lumbering sort of like percussion at the end, and some like moaning. It's just like it's like simultaneously very sparse, and there's not a lot happening like in terms of the instrumental variety, but then it's also like kind of like loud and like in your face, and I don't know.
Yeah, it's one of the best closers I've ever heard. I'm ready to say that, and like I mentioned before about this album being like feeling at once like new and ancient. And this song is probably the most intensely I feel that. Like the choir, the shrill high-pitched choir squeal that repeats through to the end of the album is like, it's, I don't know, it's so elemental and again tribal and just innate and I don't know, it's really beautiful and haunting and yeah, it's a really like special and just correct way to close this album.
Yeah, I just want to read the last line. I don't know what it means, but like the universe, I see your face looks just like mine is just like very evocative of something.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I just remembered one thing, because you said the word something. In the Headwaters booklet, he said that the reason, like, why those songs are called something in parentheses is because it doesn't matter what they are, it's more important just that they exist, which I thought was really interesting.
That is really interesting. And I guess that makes sense with the, like, because, yeah, we talked about that last time. They're not really instrumentals, usually.
Yeah.
They're just kind of,
they're just noise.
Yeah, they're just kind of noise.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just some other quick things from the, like, Headwaters booklet that I thought were interesting. For one, there's, like, a lot of references to Little Wings material. Like, Kyle Field, again, who shows up on this album a lot, has his own sort of discography full of music that I should probably give more attention to. But apparently there's a lot of references to his music. Like, half the footnotes are like, look at this track from Little Wings.
Yeah. That was kind of funny.
Also, so again, we keep mentioning this Headwaters booklet. Basically, it's like a little booklet that its entire purpose is just an explanation of the Mount Eerie album. And it starts out with the lyrics, and then the lyrics have footnotes, and footnotes kind of explain things in more depth. But then at the end, there's these crazy, like, really chaotic drawings and notations and diagrams that I am not really even close to, like, understanding what they mean or what their purpose is. Honestly, it looks like...
It's a treasure map.
Yeah, it looks like... It's like the Always Sunny in Philadelphia, like Pepe Sylvia. Charlie is like connecting lines on random. Like, that's genuinely what it looks like. There's like timelines and like speech bubbles that just say ah.
There's like you have to have a certain like Nick Cage in National Treasure
You really
energy
do, like...
and drive to to dive in and decode the end of this. I part of it is it's probably a little bit easier to get through if you're physically holding the item.
That's true.
Like it's a huge fold out and we just have screenshots, but only like I don't know, who knows how many of these things were made. He like handmade it, I think. So
yeah, probably not many.
Yeah.
I've never seen anyone claim to have it. I just kind of see the images tossed around online.
I did see one person say somewhat definitively that he made 50 of these, but I don't know what the source on that is.
Okay, that seems like a lot of work, honestly.
Yeah, well, I think he made a master copy and like printed the rest, but still he burned the CDRs and did all that stuff himself.
Yeah, and then another thing that I thought was interesting is that at the very end he sort of lists a bunch of songs that were influential to this album. And I just want to read some of them because there's some interesting selections on this list of influences. So one, Twin Peaks, the show, just Twin Peaks, the show is an influence here. There's again a Bjork song, some Julie Dworin, like Dinosaur Jr. John Goodman as Walter from The Big Lebowski is an influence on this album. Bubba Sparks featuring Missy Elliott in Timbaland.
Yep.
I should have listened to that song, honestly, I didn't. And then how do you say it? Is it Sade has a song on here. So I don't know, just like a very wide range of like different things that influenced him apparently, and none of them really sound like the album. So
also those songs and recordings are what the CDR was in that booklet, and he has multiple notes at the beginning being like, yeah, these songs were used without the permission of anyone. Please do not make a big deal out of this. I am not making any money off of these.
Interesting.
Yeah. It seems like it was really just something he wanted to share and probably just handed out at shows.
Yeah. That makes sense, especially if there's only like 50 copies of it.
Yeah. I want one.
I know. I haven't even looked to see if it's probably very hard to attain. I doubt there's even any like for sale anywhere.
I dug around and I saw like a thread of people talking about it who like wanted a copy or something. They were just like, yeah, I've been looking for a while. I have never seen any evidence of anyone owning one of these.
Yeah, it's like that Godspeed You Black Emperor album or whatever that like doesn't exist. Like in real life anymore.
I'm not familiar, but that's definitely an interesting thing.
Yeah, they're like their first album, I guess, they only made like 30 copies and like no one has ever heard it. Yeah, but I guess one more thing that I had in my notes here, just there's a special note at the end that I thought was interesting, and I'm just going to read it. It's like a paragraph, but he says the album Mount Eerie ends with a big choir singing the same cycle of notes over and over. There is an alternate ending that didn't end up being used, titled Universe Conclusion. It appears on the CD 10-inch record, The Singing from Mount Eerie by the Microphones. The basic idea behind the song is it won't happen until you look away, or the image of a person on stage chanting, I won't start singing until this place is empty, until everyone leaves. Ultimately, we decided that a choir singing the same notes over and over got the same idea across. Yeah, so...
Yeah, I read that part, but I had trouble kind of understanding what he was getting at.
I don't know exactly. I think it's interesting that there is sort of like a mysterious alternate ending to this album. Like that is something that, of course, this album would have.
It's a mysterious album.
it really is. It's very just kind of like enigmatic, and also I don't know what the basic idea behind like a person on stage chanting "I won't start singing until this place is empty" means, but like I like it.
It's evocative. It
really
is.
Yeah. What else we got on here?
I don't know. I think I've said everything I wanted to or knew how to say about this album.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about how the Glow Part 2 is hard to talk about. I would say this album is maybe even more hard to talk about.
Yeah.
Just because it's so like singular and it's just like every creative risk Phil could have taken on this album, he just did it, and the whole album is just wild. Like, it's not really similar to any Microphone stuff. It's not really similar to any Mount Eerie stuff. It's kind of like a very individual experience that you really just kind of have to listen to.
Yeah. I will say that, like, I don't know, as much as Mount Eerie Part 6 and 7 is much more like a Mount Eerie release, like it's kind of, I don't know, more clean and elegantly done. It's like he does adopt a little bit of the Mount Eerie isms, like some of the he does sing pretty weird, but it's not as extreme, and it's not in the same way. It's not the same.
Yeah.
I think he really didn't do anything like this again.
No, it sort of has that like mixture of sounding focused and unfocused simultaneously, that like the Glow Part 2 had, and that characterizes kind of a good deal of the Microphone's material, but that's not really like a sonic resemblance. That's more just like a attitude that gets carried over.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad we did this and that I was able to get into this record, though, because it's good a treasure. Again. It's so cool and interesting and and truly just a singular experience.
Yeah, like I don't like ranking these albums really or giving them ratings or anything, but it's for sure one of my favorite Phil Elverum releases. It's definitely in like the top tier of my favorite projects of his, and I think it's one of the first ones I got into after the Glow Part 2. Like this Glow Part 2 and It Was Hot, We Stayed in the Water, I kind of got into like in conjunction with one another, so it's like, I don't know.
I was sort of the opposite. I went like straight into Mount Eerie after the Glow Part 2. Not the album, but the project.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. They worked kind of backward. I mean, that works too, I think. Like, I don't know. I feel like there is, despite the name change sort of not mattering, and it's really just Phil, like, no matter what the recording moniker he's using is, there is, I think, a distinction to be made between the two projects, at least in terms of the actual like full length albums.
Microphones kind of exists in a certain time and a certain space and with certain people, like whereas Mount Eerie is just Phil, you know, and that carries over no matter what.
Yeah, it does. It does.
But and yeah, no, that's it. I lost my train of thought.
Well, yeah, folks, that's Mount Eerie, the album.
Good album.
You should listen to it if you haven't.
Album.
Yeah, I keep saying you should listen to it if you haven't, as if like people who don't listen to the Microphones are listening to this.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, you know,
maybe
there's a lot to listen to out there. Yeah,
that's true.
I'm sure we'll have a few listeners who, you know, who have spent time with like a handful of really great projects and are kind of wondering where to go next.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So the next episode we're doing is let me look here, Song Islands and Live in Japan, the live album.
Yes.
Those will be fun to talk about. I love Song Islands. I actually have Song Islands on record, so I can, maybe there's some more sort of like in-depth information in there that we can find. And then Live in Japan, I actually don't think I've ever heard. So
I'm kind of opposite. I've spent a little bit of time with the live record because of its, relation to Dawn, and I haven't actually spent that much time with Song Islands, although I did ask for it for Christmas and do own a copy now.
Well, yeah. So, well, there you go. That'll be perfect then.
Yeah.
Got both sides sort of represented there.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
Well, see you next week, folks.
See you next week.
Actually, in reality, we'll be recording this episode much sooner than we recorded previous episodes because we took like almost 2 weeks to do this one.
But you guys don't know that. So
yeah.
We'll see you next week.
Bye.